Last night, I went to a Breslov group. You know, for many years I've been reading Rebbe Nachman. Well, I was very disappointed how this material has been brought down through the many channels since, very possibly, Rebbe Nachman. It's a positive thinking group. And in a certain sense, their positive thinking is no different than the Kabbalah Center for me. And even in my questioning, the leader, questioned my positions. And so I don't fit in there either. I don't fit in anywhere. And all of a sudden with all this, now that I'm exposing myself to some of these groups, I see that I have a unique contribution to make. It's not that I don't fit in, but these organizations and how things have been brought down from others. These are not unique seers. These are explicators of other people's seeing, of great people seeing. So in a certain sense, these are students of. Well, I'm not. And I'm an original source. And that's why one has to have a living source, because it's oral Torah. In this meeting last night, the woman asked for an explication. She was very honest about this. She said in the past 2 weeks, her friends and have had some terrible things happen in their lives. And she asked the rabbi if he could give an explication about it. Now, this is the most famous person in Breslov. He says, think positively. No matter what happens to you, overcome it by your own thought. And this didn't help this woman too much, but I had an answer for this. And my answer is a deep philosophical, spiritual answer. And the answer for me was that since the Purim Katan, this is the last 2 weeks of Adar Rishon, which is the 30-day period of Adar, and it comes from miraculous areas. And it is the darkest 2 weeks of the year since the full moon of Adar 1, of this intercalculated month. And this Adar 1 comes from Rod Lo, as I've said in my videos, these 30 days. And these are the darkest days of ever, because they're intercalculated. And it comes to show you the real, the mamish, up there in the highest realms. And so the blessing is in the darkness, in the diminution of the full moon. And in 2 days we're going to have a new moon, and of Adar 1 of regular. And these 60 days of happiness of Adar, maybe you should be happy during Adar, but happy from what? Because there's a covering. And so my whole opus is to see what's inside, underneath the covering of happiness. What is underneath the covering of happiness? It's the same thing I've said in these past few videos of why do they break a glass at the wedding, the happiest day of the world for these people. They break a glass. Well, these days of Adar, since the full moon, is the broken glass of the wedding. The shards of the broken glass. The negation opens up to an area that cannot be seen by the positive. And that's why the Ein Sof uses a negative. Ein Sof. You would think that the highest realms of Judaism, of the world, of life, to describe, and well, it's called, even in English, infinite, not finite. You would think that that level would be a positive level. But all this positron, all this positing, all this positive thought gets you to, if they're correct, gets you to a level of Ein Sof. And the level of Ein, of negation. And Rod Lo means head that is not a head. These highest realms are only referred to in the negative. And even in the normative, negative theology of Maimonides, who is the most normative of the normative on the surface anyway. What do you call it? God is expressed in the negative because you cannot, whatever you say about God, it's not that. God has eyes. It's not that. God is your ear. It's more. You can't express positively what God is because it's more. It's Ein Sof. And that Ein Sof is the negation. And this is why, in my estimation, when they talk about, we're waiting for Mashiach, and, Mashiach's coming. Mashiach isn't coming that way. Because they're dealing in half a deck when you're not dealing in the negative. When you're not dealing in the left, you're not dealing in the back. And that, again, another 9-minute introduction here. Did you stay with me? It looks like my stuff is unique. So maybe you should stay with me. I wasn't able to answer her. She wasn't satisfied with her answer. But I wasn't going to start giving an answer in Breslov. I wasn't going to start raising my hand and giving an answer in these, against Rebbes. But I had an answer. And this is part of that answer. And this leads me well, I could stop here as an introduction, but I'm not. Here's the video here, so to speak. Everyone has a defect. It's like a negative mark, like a pimple. Everyone has a defect, a mum. And that's the great word here. Mum. Because the word mum is spelled mem, vav, mem. Mum. The gematria of mum is 86. If a word has a gematria of 86, it has to do with Elohim. Okay? And if we make the final letter a final mem, it's 400 and it's 646, and that's Elohim with the final mem there. So definitely it's Elohim. Mum. Now, everybody's worried about their mum. If you can't, a blind man, or a man who has no hearing, or a man who has a limp, or a man who has no arm, it's a mum. Man that has no testicle, it's a mum. But if it's 86, and it's Elohim, it's a blessing. The mum is their blessing. The defect is their blessing. You see? Just like, in a certain sense, being Jewish is a mum in a normative society because everybody's anti-Semitic. In secular society, being Jewish is a mum. And that's their blessing. That they have the mum of being Jewish in a secular society. Because it enters into negation. So if everyone has a defect, and this is their blessing, the focus of their contribution to life itself and to their own personal life must come from this mum. So identify your mum. Actually, 86 and 646 come out to be 712, which is Lavan. It's white, Lavan, and Lavan in the Torah. This mum can also be considered one's fetish. Now here's the next thing, especially for a man. Every man has a fetish. If you don't think so, talk about it. Don't think so. I don't have to prove that to you. I'll make a statement. Every man has a fetish, sexual fetish. This fetish could be their personal sexual orientation. You know, maybe they like young girls. Maybe they like old girls. Maybe they like girls without a leg. Maybe they like men. Whatever their sexual orientation or personality trait, like maybe they're short, maybe they're ugly. You know, maybe they have a funny looking beard. You know, this defect is only in comparison to others and to a group norm. In other words, it's common to have 2 ears. So if you have 1 ear, it's a mum. But that's considered a group norm, or what's considered normal. You see? Normal. So a defect is only in comparison to a statistical norm. One of the ways to recognize mums is defective. It's defective spelling in the Torah. And that's why they should be looked at, these words that have defective spellings, as he took a class of. Words with defective spellings show defectiveness. This is where you're supposed to interpret Because there's special energies in the defective spellings, because it's looking for personal interpretation. In the normative spellings, it's there. But in the defective spellings, there's something missing. And what's missing is what you're supposed to be looking for. Examine yourself for your defects, see why they are there, your blockages, why they are there, and point them out to yourself. Now, the funny thing is, I was going to do this video yesterday, and I got off of it for whatever reason. Hashem put me off of it. And then after last night, I see this is a negative thinking video. Everybody has a defect, and more power to your defect. You know, their defect is your blessing. You know, your focus of your contribution must come from your defect, from your moon, from your Elohim blessing. Elohim gave you the moon. The power of the moon is the power of Elohim. Get that? The power of the moon is the power of the Elohim within you. Elohim is kind of like the physical negative kind of force that has these kind of negations down here in the interactions. So I'm disappointed with the societal's power of positive thinking. Me personally, I don't feel that's Jewish. But it seems to be being brought down that way in all groups. Think positive, avoid the negative. For me, everything comes from Hashem. If you have a negative reaction to something, it was put there for a purpose. Or you to transform that energy, not to avoid it. Think positive thoughts. But it's a moon. It's Elohim in you. And this is the great line of Yom HaKippurim. HaKippur. Hipuk. HaKippur. Of the reversals of the opposites. Why? Because Adonai Hu Ha-Elohim. Which to me is said, what does it say? Like 7 times there. Said only on Yom Kippurim, Yom HaKippurim. The Shema we say every day and stuff like this. But on Yom HaKippurim we say Adonai Hu Ha-Elohim. This union of opposites, or parent opposites, of the physical and the spiritual. And you're going to have to get the positive and the negative, because there's no language without negative. No, I do not want any more tea. Don't eliminate the negative. And that's what I'm going to call this. A moom is a negative, it's a defect. Of course it is. You can't see out of one eye, it's a defect. Don't eliminate the negative. That's an introduction to this, that everyone has a defect. I'm begging you, don't eliminate the negative.